Legal cases, legal issues, legal matters. You're watching WFTV's Law Talk with anchor Christopher Heath and expert legal analyst, attorney Mark NeJame.
Hi there, I'm Christopher Heath, and you're watching WFTV's Law Talk. With me is Mark NeJame of the NeJame Law Firm and Albert Yanfa, who is a partner at NeJame Law in the personal injury division. What we're talking about today is essentially whether or not people have insurance when they drive. And it's scary to think that like a quarter of all the drivers on the roads here in Florida don't have insurance, but that's just where we're at. So it gets into both, motorists who don't have insurance and personal injury protection, which we often call PIP.
That's right. And Chris, it's really a horrific thing that when we find as personal injury lawyers that people get involved in an accident, and then there's horrific, terrible damages. People are crippled, they're killed, they're paralyzed, and there's no insurance. And you said it right, it's 27% of drivers in Florida do not have insurance. And so, a client might come to us and they've got all these injuries and they need to be compensated. And the people without insurance oftentimes don't have any personal funds to go after. And so these people are left with these lifelong injuries, and there's really little that can be done about it. We need to do something with our legislature. We need to make some changes so that people can be protected if, in fact, they're the victim of somebody's negligent actions.
And you said something there, and I want to bring this to you, Albert. If they don't have insurance, the odds that they have like a personal fortune or a bunch of assets you can go after probably isn't there. So now all of a sudden, there's really not a lot.
That's very, very true. That's very true. That is why, when you're talking about 27% of the drivers not having insurance, you need to have your own coverage to protect yourself in those situations. Florida is #1 for drivers driving around the state without any insurance whatsoever. You have to protect yourself, and that's where UM insurance, underinsured motorist coverage, kicks in. The average accident that leads to a hospital stay has a $60,000 bill, $60,000. So even with your own $10,000 policy to protect you, that's just not enough. We are consistently telling people you have to have UM coverage. Always elect to have the maximum that you can afford to have. And then on top of that, there's something called stacking. So if you have multiple vehicles in your home, you could have a $50,000 UM policy for one vehicle and a $50,000 for the other vehicle. But it's important to elect to have those stacked so that if there is an incident, now you have 100 because you stacked both vehicles. So again, Florida, there's so many things that we can be proud of. Some of the things are a little bit crazy. #1 in uninsured drivers, you need to have UM insurance.
And the law requires you to have insurance, but again, the law requiring and people actually doing are two very different things. And motorists it's just the way of the world right now, especially in Florida. Your odds of running into another driver that doesn't have insurance, pretty good.
That's 1 out of 4.
Yeah.
And not only that, Chris, but there are times when we do go after somebody with assets and they don't have insurance. So don't think that you're just going to get away with it, because you still may be gone after, and a judgment might be entered against you, which now you've got a judgment there, and that prevents you from a whole range of things. Your credit is good for 20 years, and then it can be renewed. So, some people are trying to sneak by that can well afford it, and pretty much everybody can afford some measure of insurance that at least gives you and the other side some measure of protection. It's irresponsible and it's dangerous not to.
And I think that's an important point, and that is just because you decide not to have insurance, just because you're like, well, I don't have any assets they can come after, this could be long-term if you cause an accident against somebody else, and people need to be aware of that, right, Albert?
It is. Unfortunately, that wouldn't help a client who is involved in an accident with these people. So backing it up, there's certain things that you have to do to protect yourself. #1 is to avail yourself of any insurance you do have, including that PIP insurance. So if you are injured, you have 14 days to go seek emergency medical treatment, and it's very important that people keep that clock in their head. You have 14 days to go to the ER, get seen, and get checked out. That way you avail yourself of your own insurance coverage that the state requires, which will pay up to $10,000 of your first $10,000 in medical bills. Now, legislatures are always tinkering with this. Every state has some wackadoo policies on it. Florida revisits it frequently. The rationale about the no-fault insurance is you and I get into an accident, I get your insurance information, I go to the hospital, I say, doctor, here's his insurance coverage, please treat me. The doctor says, okay, let me get on the phone with said insurance company. The insurance company is going to say, well, I don't know who's at fault. I'm not paying until I do an investigation. So the doctor hangs up the phone, comes back to the waiting room and tells me I need to go home because no one's paying for my bills. So I go home with a bleeding head, and you know what happens. So Florida's doing the best that it can, but it's still an evolving law, but you need to avail yourself of every possible policy you have.
And if I could just add one thing, it's not just going to the ER, because a lot of times people have an accident and they don't necessarily feel it until a day or two later. You must get some health care provider and go visit them. It doesn't necessarily have to be just the ER. But if you can get to the ER, if your injuries, if you have suspicion of internal injuries or other injuries, get in there right away. But if all of a sudden you're feeling something, like Albert said, you've got that 14-day window. And if you miss it, you're out of luck.
And like we so often talk to somebody. And you know, it seems like when you're in an accident, that's the last time you're going to be trying to pick up the phone and call somebody, but that's the absolute time you need to be getting expert opinions and expert advice and figuring out what to do next, because you're right, the clock is ticking. And we do toss around a lot of acronyms here. PIP, Personal Injury Protection. People may hear that and wonder, what is PIP? Personal Injury Protection, very critical. Albert, thank you, as always. Mark, thank you. If you'd like to see more of this segment or any of our other law talks, visit our website, wftv.com/legal, or join us each week right here on Facebook. I'm Christopher Heath, and thank you for watching.
WFTV's Law Talk was brought courtesy of the Personal Injury and Accident Division of NeJame Law.